Thank you, Randy. You can see water is an important issue here. And it's obviously is. We are not connected to state water right now. I'm like Ryan Blatz. Reluctantly, I think that connecting to water, the state water might help us, but I still firmly believe that we should protect our water basin, our aquifer. Now, it might help us indirectly, just like the other gentleman just said about if Ventura connects to the state water, it could potentially alleviate our allocation to West Ventura. So that could possibly help us. In terms of development, I also agree that the way to regulate that is through the general plan. But we have to start thinking of ways of conserving more. When we think about this valley and we think about how unique it is we get our water from down where we're at, and we have to treasure that. We have to keep that principle part of our values, and to do that is through conservation. But we do have to have a back plan. I think that we need to be responsible in terms of figuring out other ways of supplying water to this community to keep these citizens here in Ojai. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Lara. Mr. Johnston?
It's a real test of short-term memory retention there on the question, but I guess the short answer is that, you know, I support the concept that was produced by the Three Sisters plan, and it's a concept, as they will point out, not an actual plan, but the idea of us having access to state water would be a good thing. Would it be growth inducing? It depends on how they do it. The current proposal coming through the city of Ventura, or coming from Callegas into the city of Ventura, we have no control over. That's a done deal. The question right now is are we going to cooperate, and is Ventura going to cooperate with us to bring water east-west in sufficient volume to be of some assistance and support of the valley for water security reasons? All of the engineering right now says that the plans to bring that water across east to west will not produce enough water even to solve our problem here in the valley. So we needn't worry about it being, you know, an oversupply. With regard to do I want the water to be used by the oil companies? My answer is absolutely not. Now, how we go about doing that, that's a Casitas Municipal Water District and the water laws of California as to who buys what. But if we get involved in an access to the state water, we need to be sure that what we're paying for is something that supports us for water security reasons and not for growth inducing or not becoming just you know, more of the same. I always liken it to widening freeways. You know, they add another lane and it's great for a day or two, and the next thing you know, it's clogged again. When you bring an additional supply of water, you got to be careful and be sure it's solving the problem we have and not just providing additional water for development. I'm less concerned with that than I am with what's going on as far as the drought. We do need to have the ability to reach the state water when it's available. And as some people say, it may not be available, and I say, well, you know it won't be available if you don't even have the connection or the ability to reach the connection. So I don't know that I covered all the points on that, but my time is well over.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We're going to let these five great minds have a little break for about 10 minutes. So we'll gather back in 10 minutes to ask questions from the audience. We have the restrooms are in the back of the building, and we also have water to drink at the front table. So see you all in 10 minutes. So welcome back, everybody. Before we get started, though, we have a little bit of a political scandal that I have to confess to. About a month before Deborah Pendry of the Ojai Valley Green Coalition approached me about being involved in this issue, I had personally, as an individual, nothing else, as an individual, endorsed the re-election of Johnny Johnston for mayor of the city of Ojai. No, we're not here for that. So anyway, I wanted to disclose that to you. So anyway, now we have the most exciting part of the evening. That's your questions for each of the candidates. Each question will be answered by 1 minute by each of the council candidates and the 2 mayor candidates. one of the big issues here locally and actually around Southern California is the use of rodicides to kill rats and gophers. So this question relates to that issue. Would you be in favor of banning or restricting pesticide use and roticide use on public and private lands in the Ojai Valley or within the jurisdiction of the city of Ojai? We'll start with Mr. Blatz.
Well, issues like this, I don't have a blanket absolute yes or no answer because I just don't think it's fair without looking at all the facts and what this actually means. But I can tell you that the process for reviewing any of these that I feel is important is a cost-benefit analysis. And anytime you're going to have anything that clearly has a detriment to our community, the benefit better be very significantly high before we say we are not going to use something or we are going to allow something to be used. And the questions, just as a simple question of, what types of leaf blowers are more appropriate for our community, can have a lot of different angles and a lot of information. I don't know what all of the different cost effects, commercial effects, and what all the environmental negative effects are with the current usage. So I would hold my answer to having more data, but I would definitely be open-minded to the idea that if it's not highly beneficial to our community and there's a clear detriment, then it's not something we need.
Thank you, Mr. Blatz. Mr. Wyrick?
I was really proud to be the city's delegate at the California League of California Cities, where the league voted to have the state law changed to give us more local discretion, give us a more local ability to regulate these types of chemicals, and I think that's extremely important. When you talk about a rodenticide, you say, well, okay, do we have to, control some rats or mice? And actually, those electronic traps work pretty well without having to use rodenticides. The same thing with glyphosate. There are alternatives that are not as detrimental to the environment. And when those alternatives exist, I think in particular, the city should be encouraging, and we should also be the private users, to the extent that we have the jurisdictional capability that the state hasn't taken away from us. And the other thing is we need to set an example with what we're doing with our Public Works Department and try to influence the county in terms of their practices.
Thank you, Mr. Wyrick. Mr. Haney?
So when I think of rodicides, I think, first of all, I think of dark skies. I think of coyotes howling, and I think of rats. Okay, and where I live, I live behind a field, and I have a serious rat problem. Okay, and for many years, I'll be honest with you, I did use rodicides. I do not use them anymore because I don't see the coyotes in my neighborhood that I used to see. So I understood clearly what was happening by me not being a good steward of our environment. So I've stopped that activity. When it comes to pesticides in general, you have organics and you have inorganics. And I think all of them have issues. So obviously I'd be for more organic use of any type of pesticide than I would for a synthetic. All of them have a purpose. All of them should be managed well. All of them should be, when they're utilized within the community, they should be.
Thank you, Mr. Haney. Mr. Lara?
Yes, thank you. Rodenticide. I was proud to be part of that council member that got lobbied by Patty Pagaline to introduce a resolution against rodenticides because we saw such a negative impact on our habitat. And there's so much information on how that affects our habitat, their chain from even raccoons to mice to coyotes to hawks. It's just an ongoing effect on our habitat chain. So I would not support using rodenticides as long as pesticides. So I own the landscaping business, and I'm proud to say that we have really changed our philosophy because we advocate for organic uses, not just because it's good for us, but it's good for our soil, it's good for our plant material, just in general, cleaner watershed. There's so much benefits by doing things organically. Now I have to say I do use a little bit when it's appropriate, but in general, if you could go organic, I would absolutely encourage you to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Lara. Mr. Johnston? Mr.